Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Product Analytics PM UX weekly meetup for February the 15th. We have no sticky items and also no action items from last week. So, Rob, you have the first agenda item.
Yeah, so with the announcement of the new release schedule, which makes absolute sense, I wanted to just try and align UX work to coincide with what we need to get done at each point in that release schedule. Because anything we do in UX realistically needs to be a good couple of milestones ahead of when we need to actually start developing it, especially on the front end. So I just wanted to see. I know you, Sam and Dennis, you've both been going through all the issues, trying to allocate them to various stages. So I wanted to get feedback from you both what you felt the UX work that we should be targeted is going to be. I've listed some known unknowns like the visualization solution designer and onboarding flows like saving dashboards, visualization flows, connecting to the project group level params that optimize built into the backend, and how the visualization designer links into that, creating and editing dashboard flow, funnels, the widget, the configuration of funnels, all that sort of stuff, plus more that we probably don't know about. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, so on the different feature states, alpha is basically our release where we want to share something with the world, but we don't know if the feature set is complete or not. So a lot of that's going to be trade-offs in terms of like, oh, this is easy, we can do it in a day, let's just throw it in, or this is going to take a year, let's not. So we'll figure that out as we get closer to beta, which is where we should really have our feature set locked down by. In my mind, and this is just open for feedback as well, funnels is something we can do after GA if we need to. I'm expecting that to be a big lift, and it'll also be a good, release number 2 where we can say, here's the brand new funnel release. A lot of the other items you've listed there, Rob, I would like us to target for what ultimately becomes our first GA. A lot of these feel more like UX polished, help users have a good experience. That said, though, if some of these are bigger or smaller, I'm open and happy to have trade-off conversations. I don't think any of these are things we won't ever do. It's just going to be a matter of where do we sort of draw that line in the sand with what's alpha, beta, versus what do we do in V2, 3, etc.
Okay. That makes sense. A lot of the things I pointed out are just when we all joined the team a while ago, we had this vision of how the flow would work from a user's point of view in terms of adding a dashboard and filling it all in and saving it and then getting it reviewed and all that sort of stuff. And obviously right now we're missing large chunks of that flow, which is where these questions came from. But it sounds like we don't yet know necessarily how much of the full flow we want to get out for alpha, at least, for instance.
Yeah, that's part of the issue breakdown we're doing right now.
That's fine. So would it be fair to say that next week we should have a good idea of what features we need to start targeting next?
Yeah, I think that'd be reasonable. A week should give us enough time to get things at least slotted for all these different release cycles. I mean, we know all of these are going to be important for us to do as well. So I think if some of these aren't already covered in either 1510, we should get them slotted for 1511 to be worked there as well. At least so we'll know how big of an item something is, so we can really have a data-driven way to say, oh, this is too big, we're going to push it out, or it's small enough, it's critical to the workflow, we're going to pull it in. Does that help?
It does indeed. Jan and Dennis, you both have been commenting in the doc if you want to verbalize your points.
Sure. There's an epic for schema-driven customizable dashboards for product analytics, which is kind of like running parallel to the product analytics epic. some of the issues there covers some of the things we touch on. So I just wanted to highlight that to, yeah, I think everyone should just go and check out the issues there.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just trying to like take a look at the list and try to quickly like mentally stack rank them, but I think that's part of what Sam and I just have to do is in terms of slotting these and doing that exercise, but also how that would fit into the release, basically repeating what Sam said. But I did add one comment that I wanted to cover, unless this is covered elsewhere, but that configuration screen. I think we'll need to create a home for that, and I think it's a known unknown. Whether that needs to exist for customer number one is debatable, but I don't know. I wanted to get your thoughts on that, if that's something that we missed as far as what this agenda initially had.
Configuration screen is a concept we have. The implementation details, low priority, low hanging fruit, something that I want to mock up eventually, probably in the next week or so, when I've got a bit of spare time. But more broadly, the configuration screen is, at the minute, we don't have anything else to put into it because we don't have that full configuration flow that we haven't even figured out what that is yet.
Right. So that would mean then it is kind of a known unknown then, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Making sure.
I agree with you.
Okay.
Speaking of priorities, as Rob just mentioned, one of those issues being like a low priority change. Is there anything we can do to help like prioritize or with the scheduling of these issues as they're broken down into smaller milestones or epics rather? Since like everything in the customer, like currently everything in the customer preview epic just has like the same priority attached to it, I think.
Yeah, that's the exercise that Sam and I have to kind of go through. In terms of if you want to assist with that, we can potentially turn it into just a group-wide refinement session where we are quite literally reviewing it together, and you know your thoughts would be useful since you're closer to the actual work to be done, and that can inform us in terms of priority and feasibility for each release. That's one way to do it. Or the alternative is Sam and I can go through the exercise and give it a first pass and do it and pass it to y'all async, and you can see if there's any gross items that are like that's a lot of effort. That may not make sense based on that. But Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, so one thing I think that would be really helpful, if you see any issues or epics that are in there already that are just essentially placeholder issues, if you wanted to add any details or context and in the issues themselves, that would be helpful. Or if you see things that are too big and we should really break them down into epics, let's go ahead and do that. That's going to be a big part of the exercise to break the customer preview epic down into alpha, beta, etc. So if you all want to help do that asynchronously, that's something I think everyone can contribute to doing. Otherwise, yeah, we can do either a group refinement session. We can put a version out there to review asynchronously and get feedback. So I think those are the two different ways y'all could help if you're interested in doing that.
Yeah, sounds good.
Because a lot of those issues I think are even from like August or October of last year, when it was very much like we're just talking synchronously and we just make an issue while we're talking so we don't forget it. And we haven't revisited it since then. So I'm sure there's lots of things in there that could do with another review since we talked about them last.
Yeah, I was actually kind of doing some housekeeping today on just renaming a lot of the stuff that was still called widgets or using terminology that we no longer use and doesn't exist. And I think it will be a good thing for like during the next week to do some housekeeping and remove some of those old issues if they're no longer applicable, because it is kind of, I can imagine that it would help make it less overwhelming for the new engineers joining. Also have the next agenda item. Yeah, I've gone through, this is just like a FYI, I've gone through all the product analytics epic issues and marked everything that I think is UX related with a UX label, just making it easier to find those and identify what needs UX input, which for the time being as Rob and myself. Then also I've created a few new UX issues. This is mainly to resolve bugs and improve the UX of the product analytics dashboard. Chief among them is to implement the new look and feel design that Matei did for during the dashboard group while we were looking at how to do filters. I've also confirmed with Brandon from Optimize that this is the direction that they're heading in or planning to head in. So we can go ahead and do that. And Rob, I see you commented there that Tim has made some progress, which is awesome. And I just wanted to also note that I did check out his MR and see that there's like the issues that I created like still remain applicable.
Oh yeah, 100%. It is just a small iterative improvement towards getting towards what those designs look like, more or less, that he's added. So yeah, I would be very happy if we ended up looking exactly what Matei's made. They are lovely.
Yeah, totally agree. And the good news is it's not that many issues that we need to solve that I think will get our dashboard looking nice and polished. Like currently it's very rough around the edges. Like it's good enough for us to develop quickly and iterate on. But I think with a few of those issues solved, it would be looking very nicely.
Sure.
Yeah,
so
those polish. Go ahead.
One thing we could do on the improved dashboard and panels look and feel, if we could find a way to articulate what the scope of that is beyond just using the word improve, I think that would be helpful. Because we could fix a typo and call it done since it's improved in that case. So I'm looking at this. These are, you said Matei's designs that he had put together. It looks like there's also Dora metrics here as well as our stuff mixed in, right?
Yeah, so unfortunately the design like includes like a bunch of other things. The proposal like really breaks it down in depth, like what exactly needs to change. I'll update it, the title, to something that encapsulates the scope or explains that a bit better, specifically about like what exactly we're trying to improve here.
Okay. Cool, thanks. Yeah, I see the proposal with the bullets breaking it down a little bit more precisely.
Yeah, if we can, like, not for the sake of creating more issues, but separate them from like the spacing versus coloring versus and further define look and feel, then that will also help us in terms of how that balances against the release schedule, where we can prioritize some of those above others. And yeah,
as it is, I actually think like it's everything that I'm proposing we do, I feel like is small enough. It has like a weight of 2 that I feel like it could be like done in the same, like I'm wondering like if this is like big enough to break down into separate issues or to help with scheduling, since it's like quite small, the overall change.
Considering what we've coded already and the segmented nature, making our dashboard look like the design or progressing towards that, I think I agree with Jan, would be relatively small in terms of line changes. You just have a big broad impact because each one of those lines is generated on the page in multiple locations, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
do we also need something to apply this to the visualization designer? Or is this purely just for the dashboards for now?
This is purely for the dashboards. The visualization designer, I feel like, needs a lot of UX input, and I feel like it is like the Balrog from Lord of the Rings. It's beyond it's beyond myself and Rob in terms of what we can do
Good
for
analogy.
UX.
Fair enough. No, if we feel it's small enough, then that's fine. I just wanted to check it, or basically say, well, if it can be broken down further, then
I think based off these designs, we could implement a similar style into the visualization designer, but more broadly, the visualization designer needs considerable thought put into it. Whereas right now it's a bit like what the dashboards were at the very beginning, put on the page to make it show that it functions and works effectively and does what we need it to do, but it has no real considerations in terms of product and user accessibility and usability and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I was asking based on the complexity of, because if it's just color and spacing, if we apply the same principles to that, then we should. But if it needs a lot more thought, then that's totally fine as well.
The
In
visualizations
my mind, at
themselves
some
will get the
point,
same color.
in my mind,
Right.
at some point, we're going to have to say this is V1 of visualization designer, really do the like formal sort of UX design reviews and everything else and say, what do we want for V2? And that would be something that would probably take us a couple milestones to say we're going to make everything look exactly like we want these designs to look, versus, you know, we've been trying to iterate quickly and get to that first version up to this point. So I think it's okay for right now that, you know, we're iterating and building things as we think of them, but we should expect that we'll revisit this in the future at some point.
Yeah, that's exactly like what I think, or what I have in mind, what I think will work. With the visualization designer, it's functional. It's just that it has so many like different flows to it, different ways of accessing multiple things. Like you're designing things for tracked events, for sessions, for unique users, potentially also for funnels. Each of these are kind of like unique in a way. You have like the different visualizations in it. So it has a much bigger like UX complexity to it versus the dashboards, which is, you know, pretty much always the same, and it's just the panel content that's unique.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Again, as I was saying, based on the proposed solution, since it's largely with font sizes, colors, and padding, that was purely what I was analyzing it from, not from a, is this from a UX flow the right thing or not? So.
Yeah. I am busy reviewing a visualization designer update that's made. So I will, while I'm looking at that, like just kind of see if it's going to be feasible to apply these changes to the visualization designer. And I'll create an issue for that. Right. With that, the next item is private. So I'll wave goodbye for the recording.